Welcome to The Social Workers. I'm your host, Catherine Zox, and you're listening to The Social Workers radio talk show on WCDB FM, University at Albany. I'm here with my co-host, Alyssa Lotmore, and Ethan Ullman on the board. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Catherine.
Hello.
So glad to be back.
Yeah, we're back in school. And by the way, we're sitting here with our coats on. Well, Alyssa has hers on, but Ethan and I are sitting here, and I'd say it's about 25 or 30 degrees here in the studio.
Definitely chilly.
Definitely very, very cold. But it's going to be a really hot show today because we have two guests. One guest who's been on the show before. She's a social worker. She's getting her MSW at, should we call it a rival school? I don't know. Columbia University School of Social Work. And she also has a blog. She's had her own blog for quite a while. So we're going to be talking to Mira Mogilevsky and talk to her about her blog. And our second guest is David Burns. David is also a graduate. Alyssa, did he graduate undergraduate or did he get his MSW here?
I believe his MSW from the University at Albany, and then also was in our Internships in Aging project, which is part of the School of Social Welfare where students have internships with the aging, something in the aging population, something in the gerontology field where they learn those skills. So definitely a big alumni for us.
Yeah, David Burns, one of our own and author of Therapeutic Lessons. So two good guests, two social workers. And you know, part of our show, besides interviewing guests, both public and private and national and New York Times bestselling authors, the other mission of this show is to teach social workers how to be media savvy. So I think these two guests are both media savvy. They're both social workers. One has a blog and the other one has a book. So it sort of fits kind of the blueprint for our show.
Yeah, I'm very excited actually because I think a lot of students always want to think about how they can, promote themselves or how they can get their message out. And I think our two guests today are perfect examples of that. So I'm interested to see how they got to where they are today. What sort of skills and strategies and experience did they need to be able to do what they're doing?
Another thing we want to make an announcement because our show is going to be, we're going to be airing once a month from now on. For spring semester, and fall semester is too far away for us to think about. But anyway, so we're going to do it once a month, and I think, and this isn't written in stone, but Ethan's going to automate the show. So I think we're going to do this.
Right. Yeah, we'll record once a month, and then during the time slot for the remainder of the month, we'll continue airing that same episode. So people listening to this right now, it could not be today. It could be next week.
Yeah, exactly.
You never know.
Yeah, exactly. So we're really going to highlight these guests because they'll be on once a week. So that's 4 weeks each month anyway. So we'll be doing 4 live shows, right? And Ethan has a show too. I know we're not supposed to be advertising anything, but we can advertise your show.
We can advertise station stuff. Absolutely. Yeah, I do. I've been doing a show for 5 years on CDB. I do a stand-up comedy radio show every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight. I interview comedians, celebrities, musicians, and even the great Catherine Zox was on my show.
It was a pleasure.
That was such a fun interview.
Yeah. Ethan's great, and you can tell he's got a great voice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You definitely have a radio voice. But you also now do stand-up comedy yourself?
Yeah, I've been doing stand-up longer than the radio. So I do that locally, and I did a show in L.A. a couple months ago, and I've had some good success with it. It's a lot of fun. I produce shows locally as well.
So what about the L.A. show? You're not selling it because it's over, right?
Yeah, I won't say anything that we're not supposed to say on the radio.
I'm getting really paranoid about this, yeah.
No, I was in L.A. on vacation, and a friend of mine produces a show, and he put me on. So it was really cool to perform with people who the next night were going to be like on Conan and TV and stuff. It was a great experience.
Very cool. I have a real admiration for stand-up because I think stand-up comedians, that's the most difficult thing you can do. I mean, I do a lot of theater and voiceovers, radio, all this stuff, but I think I could never do stand-up. I mean, standing in front of a live audience who's supposed to laugh at what I have to say. I mean, and didn't laugh at what I had to say, right?
There's a reason that a lot of comedians are mentally unstable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It takes a lot
yeah.
stuff missing for us to get up there. And
so what do? You have to, from a psychological point of view, because, Alyssa and I are interested in the psychology of all of it. How do you get up there and just would you tune the audience out, or do you what do you do?
I think as someone, when they're starting out with stand-up, the first thing to overcome is just the nerves of being on stage. So, yeah, you do tune out the audience to some degree, and it's more scripted. But as you get better at stand-up, you want to actually be listening to the audience, and you want to react to them, and you want to really not be, reading from a script, but you want to react to the audience and really make them part of the show as well. So that's something that you start doing once you're more comfortable on stage.
So that evolves. It becomes spontaneous. It's kind of like doing radio, right, Alyssa? I mean, at first, when you're first interviewing people, you've got your list of questions and you're anxious, and at least you can look at the next question, but you're not always listening to what the person that you're interviewing has to say and kind of going with that flow. Similar, I guess, right? Yeah,
I agree. I do a lot of interviews as well on my show, and I definitely like my interviews where I'm more just off the cuff and reacting to the person.
When you're Ethan,
right,
you have to be who you are,
and it makes for a better. For the audience. It's just more engaging when the person is comfortable. It's not so scripted. It really engages the audience, and it makes for a good show.
And being able to kind of let your hair down and be you, whatever your personality is. I mean, all the great. Actually, interviewers, whether it's Howard Stern or Rush, or it's personality.
Absolutely.
Because and I listen to those shows not just their shows, but I listen to as many shows as I can, and the shows, whether you like the person or not, but the ones that engage you are the ones where their personality is out there. Because the content may be great. I mean, I've listened to a lot of shows where great content, really intelligent people, but I could read it. I don't really need to listen to someone doing an interview. I can get the information just by reading the information. So it has to be entertainment.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
It does. So it's definitely a lot of people out there are getting into more radio, and I think it's a good tool, and that's why I'm really glad that our students are involved in the radio as well, because it really is a tool to help promote self-growth and being able to interview, to use those skills that you need to ask people questions and get answers and have it in an engaging way. Because for social workers, you need to be able to have that engagement and that connection with the people that you're trying to reach.
Alyssa, we were talking earlier about different ways that social work students in particular, can engage in the media besides the radio. And you came up with some pretty, I think, clever or just informative ways in which they can participate and become more media savvy, opportunities for doing that.
I mean, there's a lot of things even on campus as you get involved in, trying to promote events, talking to people who are, professors who are doing research, doing different things to help gain that experience of interviewing, and then also promoting to the student body of what is going on and actually getting out there your message. I mean, with social media today, there's so many different ways to reach people, and you have to just be able to present it in a way that other people want to sort of follow what you're saying, and also present it in a way that's easy to understand yet entertaining, as you said, because that's really a key to keeping. It's not about getting the listener, it's about keeping the listener.
Yes, not about getting the listener, but keeping the listener. You're absolutely right. And I think and we're not necessarily academic social workers, but sometimes we tend to talk in social work terms, and then you can't keep the listener. It's difficult because, unless you are involved in the discipline or you are a social worker or a sociologist, it becomes kind of academic, and our message becomes academic, and then we lose our audience.
Well, I mean, I think some people maybe a good portion of people who listen to the show don't have the social work background, and but they're interested in the topics, they're interested in the authors and the some of our how to blog or the mental health that David's going to be talking about. They're interested in it, but they might not want to know all the specific social work details. So I think keeping it in a way that is audience friendly, that you don't need the degree in the topic to understand it, is really key.
Well, audience friendly here. Ethan is audience friendly. He's a comedian. He's not a social worker. So let's get your feedback, because you have heard the show. You're on the show. You're doing the show. What's interesting to you? What, as social workers, I mean, like, what kinds of topics, let's say, should we be covering?
I think, the kinds of topics are definitely current event topics, I think. I think you guys do a great job of that. And that's what people want to hear. They don't want to hear you just discussing random stuff. They want to, you're like, oh, I saw that in the news, and they're going to be more invested in the interview and the topics when, they get to learn more. Because what people ultimately want to do, they want to have stuff that they can then talk about to people. They want to hear you give your opinion on something. I know you guys were in the other room before the show. You were talking about a current event, and people don't really know. They don't really pay attention to the news. But if they hear you talking about it, then they're going to be like, oh, okay, I can tell that to my friends, and they can seem more intelligent. So that's what I think a lot of
you're right.
Stuff.
They want to sit down at the dinner table and say, oh, by the way, the current event you just mentioned,
right.
We were talking about this case in Texas, and not necessarily from a legal standpoint. We're just talking about it more from a social work standpoint. We were discussing the case, Munoz, I think it is. That's how you pronounce it. Anyway, the case where the young woman suffered from an embolism in November. It was in November, and she has been declared brain dead, but she was pregnant, so they've kept her alive. It would seem to me most people know about this, but anyway, and the husband and her parents say, she's brain dead. We need to get her off life support and let her die in peace. And the hospital won't allow it, I guess. And then they've hired a lawyer, so they're suing. To me, and this is my opinion, this isn't the School of Social Welfare's opinion necessarily. I have to preface it by saying that, but I think it's cruel and unethical to keep unethical and immoral. I forget about the legalities to do this to a person and to a family. What do you think, Alyssa?
I mean, there's so many I can just imagine all the emotions that are going through people's heads. The family have one feeling of what they want, what's best for their daughter, and then the hospital has the rules and standards that the state is guiding them, or whatever the hospital board is guiding them. I mean, and it's a messy situation. The same thing as the one in California, or was it California? I'm not sure where the girl who had the tonsillectomy, was declared brain dead, and the parents want to keep her alive, and the hospital saying, no, this is, it's definitely something that's emotionally triggered, and you're going to get people from both sides who have that passion for, this is a life and it should be kept, you should keep it alive and keep the person alive as long as they can. But there
was another piece to this because she's pregnant, the one we're talking about in Texas, and there was a question, I think, on the family. I really don't know who said this, but this was in the newspapers. Like, are they keeping her alive just as a vessel to keep the baby alive? I mean, is that why they're doing it? Is that the motivation? Apparently, the baby now they're able to determine has hydroencephalitis, who is deformed. It was deprived of many minutes of oxygen. So there's that added piece to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, for Texas, I think that is the reason that she's pregnant and that they want to keep the baby alive if they can. But that just goes into a number of questions. Who's going to pay for all the medical expenses for the child? If the father, usually... The parents, if they knew something was wrong with the child, they would then make a decision with their doctors on what the best situation is. And now it's sort of, there's no control over that for the parents. The father has no rights in the matter. The mother is unable to communicate, permanently. So who is making these decisions, and when does it go back to the father's rights and responsibilities? It's just a messy situation.
There are a lot of issues. I wonder how the social workers are involved in this. You never see anything, but they must be, right?
They have to be, and it's interesting to see how this progresses.
You know what? Our guest is here. Well, what shall we? Yeah, we'll talk to her now. Yeah, David.
Yeah.
Oh, we have David first. We thought we had Miri first, but
do you want me to have them call back?
Maybe we had it switched.
Who knows? I think we'll talk to David, and I guess that's interesting.
Give me her number, I'll call her.
Yeah. Okay. This is radio. Good morning, David. How are you?
Good. How are you?
You're on. We've got you for a different time. We don't know why, but anyway, but you're here, so let's start talking. But David Burns, and your new book is Therapeutic Lessons, and you are a graduate, we understand, of the School of Social Welfare here at SUNY Albany.
Yes, I am.
Yep. Well, I'm Catherine, and Alyssa is here. She's my co-host. Both of us are graduates of SUNY Albany, and actually our board op, so is Ethan Ullman. David, my question is, I mean, here you are. First of all, how did you find out about us?
I was on the SUNY School of Social Welfare website, and I just saw the radio show there, and I checked it out, and I was like, wow, that would be an interesting experience to see if I can get on the radio and talk about things.
So were you surprised that we had the radio show? I mean, we've been on the air for now 4 years, right? This is our 4th year.
Well, I was surprised, but I think it's a great idea for this area to really kind of promote the profession of social work, which is I'm a firm believer of. You know, we need to get the word out there. We need more of us. We need more social workers.
Yeah.
So I think it's a wonderful idea for a show.
Well, so where are you? I mean, just physically, where are you? Are you in the area?
I'm in Columbia County, Malden Bridge, actually. So
you're here.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you found us on our website, because we're always curious to see who really does, you know, how they find out about us, whether they're listening on the air, you know, because obviously we're streaming, or whether you do, you know, find us on the website. But all right, so let's talk about your book. Is this your first book, Therapeutic Lessons?
Yes, my first book.
And why did a social worker decide to write a book?
Well, I've had a lot of great experiences in the field working with those with serious and persistent mental illness, and I think it's a wonderful profession to get into. And my concern is, you know, there's not a lot out there written about it on an introductory level. So in other words, if someone was in high school interested in thinking they may want to work with mental illness, you know, there's a lot of scientific textbooks written on mental illness and schizophrenia, the different types of diagnoses, but there's not really anything that's really digestible and like an introductory work. So my goal, first and foremost, was to really just kind of promote working with this population that I think is very challenging on the one hand, but on the other hand is also very rewarding.
Yeah, well, David,
So
I just want to say your book is unique then, because we were talking about this before you got on the air. Like there is a lot of body of knowledge, a lot of stuff out there that is very academic, that is, you know, that's good for academics, for scientists, for people in the field, social workers, et cetera. But when you want to engage the general public, which is what you're saying you're doing, like, that's great. High school students who may be interested in social welfare or social work, that's what that would be your audience for one of the audiences for your book.
Right. In addition to that, you know, students that are currently at the college level, either BSW students or social work students at the graduate level, you know, this is a nice introduction to this type of work. If you've ever had any questions or thoughts about, gee, I wonder what it's like to work with people who suffer from chronic mental illness, I think this is a nice kind of general introduction. You know, it's not very technical in terms of there's a whole slew of books out there on, you know, diagnoses and bipolar and schizophrenia. So, you know, taking nothing away from the great research that's going on. But this is, again, more for, I think I may want to get into this field. What's it all about? What's a typical day look like? You know, because as I said, I'm trying to get the word out, as are you, that, you know, hey, this is a great field to get into, no matter what area you decide to go into in terms of social work. It's a very rewarding career.
Well, I think what's really good is that even when we were promoting this first episode of the show, I received some emails and said, oh, David's a graduate of the University at Albany. And it really, even that was something that inspired people to say, hey, this is somebody who's sitting in the same courses that, you know, we're sitting in right now. And they're writing a book. They're so knowledgeable on the topic. They're passionate about the topic. They're still going strong, full force. You know, they didn't get burnt out. And it's something that really, I think the students look at as well as the professors, and say, hey, look at where, one of our students has gone and all this knowledge and information that they're now sharing.
Well, thank you. That certainly makes me feel good to hear that. But
David, and I want to but you know what? I want to know the process, sort of going on what Alyssa just said. Like, social workers are listening and they're thinking, wow, he wrote a book, but how do you write a book? You're a social worker, and people who are in the publishing business know how to do it. And there are other professions where people are much more media savvy. So as part of what we're doing, start from day one. What did you, I have all this information. I'd like to, be able to write a book and get it out there and publish it. How did you do that?
Well, I started writing, and I looked into some of the publishing outlets and decided to self-publish, actually. So I was able to do it all on Amazon. But, the bigger issue is really having the passion to kind of, talk about these kind of issues and put it all in a book and kind of get the word out there to people, which I feel is important. So, some people write books and they can't get a publisher to pick it up, so it kind of sits on their shelves. And, there are a lot of self-publishing options out there today. And
what are they? Tell us a couple. Let's say somebody's listening to you and they say, okay, David Burns wrote a book, Therapeutic Lessons. I want to write my book. I have something to say. And you're saying maybe, well, there are lots of options. What are two options?
Two options. Well, I've done this all on Amazon. So Amazon has you can publish a paperback, which I did. The Therapeutic Lessons is a paperback book. Through their program called CreateSpace. It's right on the Amazon website. And then you can publish books electronically for the Kindle, and that's in the Kindle Direct. You can publish a book. So, and you don't need to, there's no money up front, there's no costs. You can also do self-publishing where if you Google self-publishing, you'll come up with a slew of self-publishers, but you pay them, money for their editing services and you have to buy your book and then you sell it.
So how costly is that on the average, let's say? I mean, just a ballpark if one went that route.
If one went that route, some of the prices I've seen are anywhere from $3,000 or $4,000 up to some cost $15,000 to $20,000. So it can be quite pricey.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's just the fact that you're able to do this, and talking again about how we can use media and different outlets to really spread the message of social work. The fact that you found this way to do it, something that I never knew we could even do on Amazon, that's really amazing because you're able to get that message out in a way that is user friendly, really, for somebody who would be interested to do that. Right,
and I'm not very tech savvy. At all.
Social workers don't have a reputation for being tech savvy, do they?
No, we really don't. But I think that's changing. I think when I went to school, I had some classmates that were extremely tech savvy. And hopefully, again, as we invigorate this profession with younger people, I think that's going to change. I hope so, anyway.
Well, that's the purpose of our show, and that's the purpose you've defined our mission here at the School of Social Welfare, University of Albany, because that's what we're doing. We want to help social workers to, in the process, become more tech savvy, to be aware of social media and all the different outlets and venues for them to get the word out. So,
now I have a question for you. I mean, you've written a book. How did your coursework and your experience prepare you for this? Was there something that inspired you that really made you say, hey, I want to get this word out?
Well, again, I think I had a very positive educational experience at SUNY. I mean, I really, I can't think of a class that I didn't enjoy. I mean, I really just kind of soaked everything in. Soaked it up in graduate school. If I had my way, I'd probably be a professional student. So I had very positive experience with the professors at the School of Social Welfare at SUNY Albany. Can't say enough positive things about them. I was also in the IOP program, the Internships in Aging program. And that was also a wonderful program.
Yeah, Linda was one of the people who emailed me yesterday and was like, David's an alumni of IAP, so she definitely was saw that email about you being on the show.
Wonderful, wonderful program. That that taught us a lot, taught us so much about how to, put ourselves out there and make ourselves available, because social work, one of the best things about it is how it's a changing profession and how we change as it changes. So very positive experience at school. And then through my work experience, I've been where I am now for about 6 years and working with the clients who, again, suffer from the serious mental illness, and listening to them and spending time with them and really being open to being taught by them. I can't tell you, I feel that they really wrote this book in many ways. These are my experiences based on working with them and just kind of letting them guide me to where they needed to go and to where I needed to go, I think is really important.
Well, when you say where you needed to go, I'm curious, what do you mean by that, where you needed to go? And I guess in the second question, burnout, because as I'm listening to you talking about your patients and people with serious mental illnesses, that's a difficult task over a long period of time, and it can be very trying and enervating. So how do you take care of yourself when you're dealing with this population of clients so that you don't burn out?
Well, I have a lot of hobbies. I'm a drummer. It's a great stress-relieving thing I do on the weekends, come home and play the drums for a little while. I'm a firm believer in exercise. I like to spend time with my family, go camping and do things outside. In terms of, I think your first question was, what do I mean by let the clients take me where I need to go? Really coming into a therapeutic relationship with someone without these preconceived notions. Oh, this person has schizophrenia. They hear voices or they have delusions. So I already know them before I even meet them. Getting to know the client first, not having that opinion that, oh, I know the diagnosis, therefore I know the person. Really just taking a step back and saying, I need to get to know this person. A lot of the folks that I work with have a diagnosis of schizophrenia. They're all different. Each one of them brings different things to the table, has different ideas, has different needs, has different goal ideas. So they really helped me see them as unique individuals, as people who struggle, but also people who succeed. And I think we don't get the word about that out as often as we should. People do suffer from these horrendous types of mental illness, but people also find success and they experience, recovery, no matter what that looks like for a person. People can use coping skills and they can get better and make improvements to the quality of their lives.
David, can we talk about some of the successes specifically? I mean, with obviously exposing your clients or your patients, but, because I think what you said is really important. I know that many people on the outside, not social workers necessarily, but people, you hear a label and it's a label and then you label everybody's schizophrenic and you don't see them as a unique person with a whole set of unique experiences and that's dangerous, I think, when you aren't able to do that. So give us an example, because you talk about successes. And we also, schizophrenic, well, you just want to help somebody maintain themselves, just to, not necessarily be successful. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of our folks, by very definition of SPMI, serious and persistent mental illness, they've had multiple hospitalizations throughout the course of their lives. Some of them experience success, first of all, when they experience 2 or 3 years outside of the hospital, where they're not hospitalized. And that may not sound like much to the average person on the street, but to someone who's had 5 and 6 lengthy hospitalizations, staying out of the hospital for 3 years is a major milestone. And during that time, they see, wow, I can do things for myself. I can make decisions. I have a treatment team, a support team. I have, friends and family. I can make this happen. And I may stumble. I may end up back in the hospital again, but I know that I will be discharged. I know that I won't end up in a long-term hospitalization with no hope. I know that I can do this because I've done it before. I think that's one of the most common types of success that I've seen in terms of my work.
That's just such a refreshing, different take than we're used to hearing. I think especially if those not in the social work related field sort of do have more of those labels, and that sort of it's going to be a long-term care kind of thing. The person can never be, independent. And I really think that the way you're presenting it is so refreshing to hear that this is a different take. And I think in regards to burnout, does that type of view help you to not get burnt out? Does that also help to have that positive take on what you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely it does, because, we're always going to experience ups and downs. I experience ups and downs. You experience ups and downs. So the better we get at taking care of ourselves, like the first question you asked, how do you take care of yourself? I try to do a lot of the things that I tell my clients to do. I think I had a chapter in there on coping skills, and as something that helps not only, social workers and therapists, but clients as well. So I try to practice what I preach, and I find that a lot of the classes that I run, I'll make a statement in class like, if the only time that you get offended when someone says something to you is if you believe it. And then later in the day, I'll say to myself, Dave, that's right. Someone may have said something rude to me, but wait, I don't have to get upset if I don't believe in it. So kind of practicing what you preach and helping folks see things from a slightly different perspective.
I'm curious about one of the sort of mental illnesses that's always in the news, and you even hear people now coming out, celebrities, people who we know well, with the diagnosis of bipolar disease or bipolar mental illness. Do you see many clients with bipolar who are bipolar or who are labeled bipolar?
I see some, yes. I think that's one of the common mental illnesses, as is schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder. But yes, definitely. But with people suffering from bipolar disorder, medication has been, very effective in terms of the treatment. Medication and therapy are the golden standards for a lot of these mental illnesses. And, the real risk with the bipolar is the mood fluctuations. A person fluctuates between depression and then mania. And, the medication kind of helps hold a person within a more consistent mood, so that they don't experience the high highs and the low lows. So yeah, I think that and schizophrenia are probably two of the more common mental illnesses that we see.
I have, people, I think maybe lay people will always wonder, well, if I have a problem, do I go to a psychiatrist? Do I go to a psychologist? Do I go to a social worker? Or what is the social worker's role? And we know the social worker's role in a hospital may be different than if they're in a clinic or in private practice. Can we talk a little bit about this? Because I think that's good information to have. Because that practical information. I mean, what would you go to a social worker? Let's say if you're diagnosed with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, or do you get your referrals from physicians, or how does that, or psychiatrists? How does that work?
Well, you could go to a social worker, therapist, if you had schizophrenia or bipolar. Social workers, of course, don't prescribe medications. If you needed meds, you'd have to go to a psychiatrist. But a social worker, someone to talk, about your problems with, would definitely be a step in the right direction. And a social worker in private practice would probably help you make a referral to a psychiatrist if you needed medication. So you don't necessarily have to start with a psychiatrist if you were seeking help for a problem.
Now, for when you're speaking, a lot of your information is about how, the positive side of this, and sort of an intro into what it would be like to work in this field. And, I've been watching a lot of the media, and it's talking about like the gun violence and a lot of it's being pinned on people with mental illness in a negative light. And it's not mentioning any of the positives and any of the, it's sort of just lumping any person who has any type of diagnosis in this group of, a danger zone. And do you have sort of a message that through your book that you would like to get out there to, to people listening about this wrong, negative perception?
I think that the negative stigma that people with mental illness are violent is probably the number one stigma that clients face. And I think it's the number one stigma that staff who work with clients face, because there is this perception in the media that someone that has a mental illness is violent. And I find it very amusing that in the media, when a crime happens, they're always so quick to point out that, well, this person had a mental illness. You would never think that if someone committed a crime, the media would report that this person had diabetes or this person had a cardiac condition. Why are we so quick to focus on the mental illness, as though the mental illness causes the violence? And that's not true. I don't believe it to be true. I think that people that have serious mental health problems and are compliant with their treatment, medication, and their therapy are less likely to be violent. And I think the research literature validates that. The folks in the media that unfortunately commit the violent acts, they're diagnosed with a mental illness, but I believe that most of them were not currently in treatment. Yeah. So I think that to lump everyone together is very dangerous.
It definitely is. It definitely is, because I think it's, you're highlighting the exceptions, the extreme situations sometimes, and it's something that is, I think, hurting people who maybe want to go in the field. And I'm glad that you wrote this book, because it sort of gives that other light, for a young student who's interested in working in the mental health setting with this population, and they could have some fears and anxieties of that it's a dangerous type of job or it's a dangerous type of work environment. And I'm glad that you're giving this other perception of no, it really isn't. So for when you go to work every day, what was like a typical day for you in regards to your treatment and your therapy and your interaction with your clients?
Well, every day is definitely different, based on, who shows up to program, what's going on with the people that show up to program. I have a different schedule that varies every day. I run different groups on different days. I see different clients on different days. But it really is a kind of go-with-the-flow kind of job, which I personally like. I mean, it's definitely not scripted. Every day is not, planned out to the letter. I mean, I have a schedule, but, who knows what's going to happen once the day begins. I mean, if there's a crisis, if someone is in emotional crisis, you kind of have to deal with that, right away. Sometimes a person is upset. Sometimes a person is feeling suicidal. And, that person has to, go to the hospital for an evaluation, to protect their safety. So, sometimes crises happen, but you just kind of deal with it. And that's what makes the job so different every day and kind of fresh, because you really never know what's going to happen.
So we don't want to, if we're social worker, or if someone's deciding, you're talking about those high school kids who may or may not, who may read your book, hopefully, they have to think about the kind of personality that they are, because if you're going to go to work every day and you're not quite sure what's going to happen, for some people that's an adrenaline rush. It's exciting, it's challenging, it's exciting. But for someone who wants something very stable, 9 to 5, where there isn't a lot of ambivalence, maybe social work isn't for you.
Right, exactly. And again, I think the strength of the profession is there's so many different fields within the field of social work. Maybe a mental health outpatient treatment facility wouldn't be the place for you if you like everything, to know what's going to go on, when it's going to go on. Maybe an outpatient mental health treatment isn't the place for you. Maybe something else, maybe more of a macro job, maybe a policy job is more for you. So although this book kind of focuses more on the micro aspect of social work, there are those other opportunities within social work for people that need a little more structure and a little more control.
What about counseling? If you're doing counseling, do you believe, and I do believe, I've always felt this way, if you are counseling other people or you are doing therapy with other individuals and or families, I think that the clinician has to or should have had some kind of counseling or therapy themselves. That's my personal belief. I just want to get your feedback.
Sure. I think it's always a good idea to know what it's like to be in therapy. And, clinical supervision is so critical. I meet every week with a clinical supervisor, LCSW, who has their R, and I sit down and discuss cases, and I discuss how I'm doing, how I'm responding to certain things. Sometimes I get stuck when I'm working with a client, and I feel as though, I have to ask my clinical supervisor, do you think I'm holding this client back? Is what I'm doing holding this client back? What could I do differently? How could I be a little different and really form a better alliance with this client?
Well, I think you're right, and supervision is so critical, not only for guidance in regards to your cases, but also for that self-reflective piece. This is a stressful job, social work, no matter really what area of the many areas of social work. There's always, you're taking in other people's problems and issues and things that they're trying to go through. And you're taking some of those emotions in yourself. It's hard not to, because you're building the rapport with people, you're establishing relationships, you're working with them sometimes for longer periods of time. And it's hard when you see what they're going through when they're telling you personal issues from their lives that are, sometimes just stressful, causing them distress. So for supervision, have you been able to, has that been useful for you as that self-reflective piece to sort of take a step back and sort of process what's going on in your emotions in regards to your clients?
Absolutely, because my clinical supervisor and my coworkers as well. I'm constantly in my coworkers' offices, asking questions. Hey, this is going on with this client. What do you guys think? This is what we've been working on. This is what I've done. Tell me what I can do better. Tell me how I can improve. Do I need to take a step back? Do I need to take a step forward? And I get great feedback. One of the things that I probably didn't highlight in the book as much as I should have is I think it really matters no matter what job you have in social work, micro or macro, the team that you surround yourself with. If I could give students one bit of advice, surround yourself with brilliance, and it'll pay off. Because if you can go to members on your team, and I know I can trust all the members on my team, and I speak to them often, I have my clinical supervisor that's in my corner. So when you have that, you feel like you're never alone.
Well, you should have advised Chris Christie before you.
Oh, boy.
He needed you.
He needed that, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he needed that. But, it's a wonderful feeling. I couldn't do the job that I do now if I didn't have a really good team behind me. I think. I need that support. I need their support, and I have their support, and it's just a wonderful feeling to know that you can go in with a client and meet with a client and really get into the heart of the matter for them. And if you're not sure, that's okay. There's always tomorrow, and I get to confer with other great therapists and say, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? What would you do in this situation? And I get a lot of great feedback.
David, one of the things that you talk about are improving services. You have a kind of a list of changes about how to improve services in the mental health system. So maybe we can kind of wind up our interview with that, taking a look forward.
Sure. I put in just at the end a very short list of things I'd like to see. And one of the things I think we've been talking about already is this changing our thoughts about mental health. Not just mental illness, but mental health. We go to our doctors. I know I go to mine, and you get your annual checkup, and, you get your routine blood work done. And we need to incorporate our views about mental health along those same lines. Why not go to a therapist or some type of counselor if you're struggling. You know, if you're having trouble in your with your relationships, or you're having personal problems, you know, why isn't it more encouraged to go to a therapist? Let's make it more normal. Let's make it more. Let's make it less stigmatizing. Oh, you saw a therapist? What's wrong with you? You know. So I think the first thing we can do is just change our thoughts about mental health, and that starts, I think, in school, in grade school, in high school. You know, offering courses to kids about mental health, about the importance of mental health.
Do we do that? You know, Alyssa, do we? I mean, Alyssa has had a lot of experience in the school system, because you're equating information about our physical health, which kids do get starting at 6 years old, you know, brush your teeth, take care of yourself, all that kind of stuff. Do they talk about mental illness?
Not really, and it's sort of, you know, unless they're coming to see me, the social worker, you know, and it's usually not something that's talked about in classes, or, you know, it's sort of incorporated into curriculum about self-care and sort of health issues and that mental health piece. And I like what David said, but it is something that is, you know, sort of stigmatized, and starting from a young age, it's sort of like, oh, if you have to go see the social worker, something's wrong. Whereas it's, you know, and parents are like, oh, I don't want my child seeing a social worker. Sometimes there's that resistance because it makes them feel like there's an issue going on, or that they as a parent can't handle something. Why do they need to go see an outside provider? Whereas we don't say that if their child needs to go to the doctor. You know, I think mental health is that piece that a lot of parents and people feel that they can handle on their own. It's, you know, that internal thing that they can, they don't need a medical degree. They can handle the mental health issues on their own. And I really like how David said to sort of incorporate it into the education system at an early age, to have that general acceptance of it. Like, mental health is something that we can address. We can speak to someone else without having a stigma associated with us. We can talk to a counselor or a therapist and have it be okay.
I mean, that's a great example. I mean, you talk health is really the key word, not illness, but health. So we want to talk about mental health. And when my kids were in school, and I think they still may have this program, this is a program here in Albany called Banana Splits. And it was run by a social worker, and all the kids whose parents, either their parents died or were divorced, or they were separated somehow from their parents, would meet at lunchtime and have lunch and have a banana split. Well, at that time, I was going through a divorce, and I am a social worker, but I think one of my boys was in that age group, and he went to the class, or went to the group, the Banana Splits. And at first I was reluctant to send him, and I thought, you know, there's going to be all kinds of, you know, people are going to look at him and the stigma and stuff. But he went, and he didn't want to go. It was great for him. And of course, I was always saying, who's there? And he was very adamant about, we don't talk about what we talk about to our parents in Banana Splits. Great program, very helpful, even to someone who has a parent who is in the mental health field. So I think you're right on target with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we get kids at a younger age starting to talk about mental health, and then we also do the psychoeducation about mental illness, then our children will grow up stigmatizing those with mental illness, you know, less, to a lesser extent than people stigmatize the mentally ill today.
I mean, I think it's really all about having the young adults get comfortable and understand those coping skills as well that they need. Something that a lot of kids, unless you're seeing a social worker, don't really get those coping skills. I actually ran into a student the other day in the library, and I hadn't seen him in 3 years, and he's in 8th grade now. And he used to get very angry, and we used to work on coping skills, and we were trying to address those issues. And I saw him, and he grew, shot up, is really tall, has muscles. He used to be a chubbier kid. He has muscles now. And I was like, how are you doing? And he goes, I'm doing good. He goes, I don't get angry anymore. I work out. And he points to his muscles. And I just started laughing, because it's something that, you know, the average, you know, any student, he had that exposure at a young age. He used to see me, you know, for 3 years, you know, stop in my office every day. Really wanted to work on those social skills. That he liked that mental health piece. He liked to have that change in perception on, you know, thinking more positive. And it really worked for him. And, you know, it helped him to learn those skills for when he's older. But other kids aren't always exposed to that at a young age, unless you go see a social worker and talk about it. But I'm glad he remembered. So now he works out.
And that's a great story, because there's a kid that as he goes through life, if he ever does need to talk to a counselor, he's far more likely, because of the experience he had with you, to go to a counselor.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay, and talk things out. And I think what we're talking about now also kind of goes to one of the points I made in the last part of the book, the recruitment of qualified staff. Getting the word out at a young age to kids. There's a lot of different types of counselors. There's social workers, psychologists, there's mental health counselors, there's art therapists, nurses. We need more people in this field. We need to interject this field to provide good care for those with mental illness. So anything we can do to try to recruit more staff and more people, make more people aware, is good in my book, because that's how we're going to get more staff. We certainly have no shortage of people suffering from long-term mental illness, so we definitely need to interject the field and bring in some new folks, and I think anything we can do is great in terms of that.
Yeah, we need a team approach. So, David, it's been great having you on the show this morning, and enjoyed talking with you. We'll have to have you back. David Burns, Therapeutic Lessons. David is a social worker and a graduate of the university here, School of Social Welfare. So we'll talk to you soon, and keep up the good work.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Thank you. We're going to take a short break right now, and then we'll just come back for a few minutes and sort of round up our show. You're listening to the Social Workers Radio Talk Show, University at Albany, WCDB FM. We'll be back in a minute.
Over 13 million people are affected by famine, war, and drought in the Horn of Africa. Unfortunately, just listening to this commercial won't help them. Just listening won't give them their next meal or shelter or hope. You can help by texting GIVE to 777-444 to donate $10, and by going to usaid.gov/FWD to forward the facts. Brought to you by the Ad Council and USAID. Text donations go directly to Consortium of Humanitarian Relief Organizations. Standard text and data rates apply.
In the streets below, traffic had stopped. Pedestrians were lying on sidewalks and curled up in doorways. There was no sign of violence, no wrecks, nothing like that. It was as if the people in New York had simply decided to stop whatever they were doing and pass out. Ice coated my stomach. The invasion has started. To find out what happens next, read Percy Jackson and the Olympians by Rick Riordan. Explore new worlds and check out more cool books at your local library. And visit read.gov. Brought to you by the Library of Congress and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to The Social Workers on WCDB Albany.
We're back. I'm Catherine Zox. I'm your social worker with a microphone, by the way, and you are listening to the Social Workers Radio Talk Show with Catherine Zox and Alyssa Lotmore and Ethan Allman. WCDB FM. Today is January 23rd, and our guest was David Burns, Therapeutic Lessons, a graduate of the School of Social Welfare, who's written his own book. Hey, I think that was a great interview with David, don't you?
It was, and I really liked how it sort of went on with our topic. At the beginning of the show, we were talking about media and how social workers can be more media savvy, and I really liked how he is getting his message out through a self-published book. He's using Amazon to get his book published and his message out there, and it's something that I think a lot of social workers don't know how to do. To get that word out and to have that use the media to really inspire others and share knowledge.
Amazon. Did you know about that, Ethan? You're not a social worker, so you should have known about that, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
You did?
It's a really cool tool for people because they make them on demand. So there's not like you don't have to pay for a stock and then hope people buy them. It's as they buy them, they get printed and sent out, which is pretty cool.
Wait, so do you make money doing that, or how does that work?
I think the figures of people making money on self-publishing is still really low, but it's crazier things have happened than making money with something like that, and it's the YouTube generation of people can make movies and put them online, so now people can make books and put them online. It's just I think that's the way things are going. People, I think, are going to opt more towards self-publishing and self-promoting their own work than rely on publishers.
Well, it's a really cool thing because it's a lot of people want to get their message out there and they want to reach a certain audience. And I think the option for someone to be able to do that is really an amazing thing, to really be able to do that on your own and to get it out, to have that tool, that resource available. Sometimes it's not about making money. It's about really wanting to do something, wanting to write, wanting to get all your thoughts and knowledge down and be able to share it. So it's neat.
Yeah, it's very different than it used to be because the publishing business was very difficult to get a book published. I mean, very costly. Well, I think David mentioned that. So it was, really a lot of people. But that's kind of, as you say, Ethan, that's the past. I mean, you can get out there on YouTube. We have our shows on YouTube.
Yeah, we do.
If you want to listen to them. Yeah, Hillary, our marketing person, she puts these up, and we have our,
all our shows are up on YouTube.
Are all of them up?
From all last semester, they're all up. So at least in the most recent shows, I believe everything's mostly everything that is up, and it's really good topics. It's really good if you want to learn about certain. We had authors about speaking about the welfare, about emotional intelligence, about mindful eating. There was a lot we covered last semester that is really good to use. It's great to find out about some of the books that these authors have written and learn new tools and resources. So definitely, it's something to check out.
Well, how about the social workers here at the university doing the Navigators Program? I think that's great. We had a whole show on that. Mm-hmm. People trying to, were you involved in that specific?
No,
directly?
I wasn't involved with it directly, but I know some of the people who are involved in it, and it's really a phenomenal program. So there's a lot they can listen to about that on YouTube, on our past shows as well.
Yeah, what we're doing with the Navigator Program, and I'll just mention it one more time because I think it's Linda Mertz. Mm-hmm. She's the head of the Navigator Program, engaging social workers to help people to navigate the Affordable Health Care Act. The word is navigate because most people are kind of in the dark about that and don't know how to access the information. So who's better to help them than social workers?
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of information out there. And one more aspect I wanted to mention was I'm not a book published. I'm not planning on writing my own book anytime soon.
Why not?
But I like writing articles, and I actually had just one published in this edition of the New Social Worker magazine. It's an online magazine, but you can also get the print edition. But that's also another great tool for social workers to use because it's, a lot of articles written by people in the profession. I wrote my article on field supervision, and also there's one going to be published on the importance of agency culture, which is kind of what David talked about, who you're surrounding yourself with. But for young social workers who are entering the field, there's a lot of articles written by professionals about conversational articles about what it's like, mandated reporting. Do I call in? What is this ethical choices when you're working with clients? So that's another tool and resource. The New Social Worker magazine is a really good tool for young social workers to look at and use.
Well, congratulations on your article.
Thank you.
And yes, well, I think that's fantastic. I read the article. It's a great article, by the way. You write really well.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, yeah. Any other publications that are social work? We should mention those social work publications, e-news and stuff like that.
Not that I can think of. There's tons probably, but not that I can think of off the top of my head. But there's definitely tools and resources for social workers out there. But that's we'll talk about that. Continue to talk about that next month when we're on the air again.
Alyssa, and we are going to. Well, I guess we're going to say goodbye. Ethan, goodbye. Catherine Zox, University at Albany School of Social Welfare. You've been listening to the Social Workers Radio Talk Show, WCDB FM, January 23rd. Have a great day.